With me today is Mr. Martin McPhillimey from Performance Through Health in the great country of Bali. So welcome from across the way. I guess what we were saying, 13 hours difference.
That's it. Yeah, thanks, Scott. I appreciate me having me on. Like I say, in the very beginning, we have been following each other. As soon as I saw the Rest and Recovery podcast pop up, I was like, that's straight in into my niche, and been following along, and I've been enjoying the content you've been putting out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, same here, especially as of late. It's really struck a chord with me on some of the things you're talking about and coaching about around burnout and, stress management, two things that really were the unfortunate seeds to the podcast itself, but it's prevailing to provide some opportunity at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the name for Performance Through Health says itself. I worked in the sleep industry and the breathing industry in the clinical field for 9 years. And I saw a common pattern in individuals, high functioning professionals who are getting things like sleep apnea and burnout and issues with chronic disease, like in their early 50s. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like they're active. They say they're slim. They're not like the typical obese individuals that we would usually see. And I really thought, what is this? And it just come down to me is there was a common theme that there was a lack of value in sleep and recovery in these people, because it was all about the grind. The thing you tagged me in the other day, the word grind is literally wearing down, abrasion, but then you get professional business coaches out there telling people to work 18 hours a day or their business is not going to be successful, and people get it into their mind. And to change that belief has been one of the biggest challenges that I've come across, because these individuals are so, I think I touched on it before, is often their desire to work hard is because of a fear of failure or a fear of not being successful. So to let that go is brutally challenging. And unless you can figure out a way to show them that it's going to be a better high performance, or they have a catastrophic event like a cardiac arrhythmia, or even worse, a heart attack, right? And it's challenging to change that belief system.
Yeah. And as somebody who grew up in the .com era professionally, seeing that firsthand, where it was like they're handing out Mountain Dews and chips, to keep you going. And that just became part of the culture. And, it's definitely a thing that we have the equation flipped. And it's like, I was thinking about this week, that when we want energy, we tend to add things that are going to gin up the system rather than the other way around. Does that make sense?
Is to get energy. If we're already expending too much and spending too much money at a bank, and we're going into our debt, we don't want to spend more. We don't want to spend. We don't want to add to things that's going to make us spend faster. Right. We want to be able to bring our bank balance back into the positive again. And that's where the likes of having just rest, the word rest itself nowadays is people flicking onto these, people looking at the news, like that's getting bombarded by dopamine. It's still heightening the arousal system. Yep. So I think the word rest itself nowadays has become so forgotten of what it is. It's such a forgotten tool. People just think, okay, well, sleep's enough. Well, it's not nowadays, because there is so much activity, so much arousal, and particular personality types that are pushing so hard to continuously work.
Yeah. And it's kind of, you mentioned, I just thought of the term passive stress, and we think it's rest, but it's passive stress, where we're looking at the phones. We've got the blue light, we've got the TV, we've got some kind of thing. I even noticed something where my wife and I were watching a movie. We're like, hey, let's chill out and watch a movie. Well, it turned out to be a pretty intense movie. And I'm like stressed out right before I go to bed.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if it's gripping your emotions and it's bringing your emotions up and down, it's shifting adrenaline, noradrenaline, acetylcholine, dopamine all over the place. That's making all your body work in a way where it's trying to balance that homeostasis back out again, which is essentially what anything that's a stressor is sending your body out of homeostasis.
Right.
So
right.
anything that's rest is basically trying to keep that homeostasis balanced or bring it back into balance. So yeah, passive stressors where people think like, for example, me last night, in my head, I was like, okay, all of a sudden had a theory about something I've been pondering on for a very long time. And I started to read a journal article that I come across, and this was 10 o'clock at night. And I said to myself, Martin, stop. Because despite it being reading, this is just going to send my mind into a cascade of my science brain going, right. And that is a stressor.
Yeah.
It really
gonna
is.
find rabbit holes, right?
Yeah. And that's it. And I said, you've got an interview with Scott tomorrow. Like, you want to get a good night's sleep. So I put it away and I said, I'll get back to that tomorrow. But if I wasn't self-aware enough or conscious enough of what rest is and what not rest is, then I could have gone down that rabbit hole and probably would have got a poor night's sleep.
Yeah. So we were talking culture. So how do you build up those healthy boundaries on those types of issues?
I think number one is having the awareness of what stresses you and what relaxes you. I think some individuals are not aware enough to know when they're actually in a state of stress, because if you're a type A personality person who actually thrives off it, and it almost stress makes them feel good in essence, then it's challenging to, like I said before, it's challenging to change that belief to tell them, oh, actually in your body it's not good. You might feel excited, but in the long term it's not too good.
Right.
So it's, for me, it's always looking at people's beliefs and what they currently believe, what they're kind of, how do they currently rest? If you ask the question, so when do you take a break? What do you do for taking a break? What's the sort of rest you do? How well do you sleep? What do you think good sleep is? Get those questions back and then look at their beliefs, and then use the knowledge that I have to know what rest and recovery is, to then, okay, hey, I know that I'm going to be challenging some egos here. And then trying to work with them together, communicate in a way that's from a frame that they're going to be positive about. Because one of the things I've always found out, the most challenging thing, and this comes back to my very first client with Performance Through Health, was a female who ran her own business, but was also an executive at another business. She trained twice a day, morning and evening, 6 days a week.
Wow.
On a day off, she went for an hour walk. She was a mountain climber who was trying to climb like Everest and Abu Dhabi and all these other things. And she was getting poor sleep. And she'd come to me, and I said, "Oh man, I've heard you on a podcast. I'd really like to get involved with you. And I'd love to have my sleep fixed." And I was like, "Okay, well, let's have a look at your sleep." So we did a sleep study, and she thought she had insomnia, but it turns out she had something called sleep misperception, which means that she's sleeping more than she realizes.
Huh.
But when I looked at her nutrition, she was eating less than 2,000 calories a day. When I looked at how much time she actually had to herself, none. How much she was training, and then her beliefs around how much she could train compared to other people, was what I was trying to challenge. I was trying to challenge her that she needs to slow down to recover, and she's in a place of overtraining and overburning out. And we worked together for maybe about 6 or 7 weeks, and personality, how fast she wanted results in the time frame that she had. She had 7 months to train for this thing, but she wanted 7 weeks or 8 weeks to be able to get back to feeling great again.
Yeah.
I said to her, look, this might take, you might have to go back to training 4 times a week for 6 to 8 weeks just to start to feel some energy again. I can't do that. Why? Because all my friends are out training me. Everyone in the gym is training more than I can't have that.
Right.
So like being able to, and eventually I lost this client because I was just trying to come at it from a perspective of, I've got the knowledge, you need to listen.
Right. Yeah. And
I tried to kind of like let go of some things and try to manage it in other ways, but because we weren't seeing results, because I wasn't able to, when I first started coaching, weren't able to communicate in the way that she needed to hear it.
Right. Yeah.
It didn't work out.
Yeah. So that makes sense, because I can relate to some extent. But it's like, what's driving that goal too? Like, what is your goal? What is your vision for yourself? And then, that comparison trap, maybe even a little bit, where other people are doing X and I need to keep up with them. But it boils down to why. What's your why in that? It sounds like.
It definitely it does, and I think I always try to come back nowadays to try and have a conversation around: are you doing this because you love the sport, or you love the work you do, or are you doing it because you're fearing that what you're not successful in what you're already doing? And I think whenever you come from a place of a fear-driven motivation, it's going to result in a burnout or ill health.
Absolutely.
Because you're not able to step away from it and say, actually, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing it for validation.
Right. It's that external contributing factor that you're trying to get someone else to validate you.
That's it. Yeah. And whenever external manages your internal, it's managing your energy, it's managing your stress, it's out of your control. So simply by taking the power back over, by saying, okay, well, actually, what am I doing this for? Am I doing this for me? And the real clip that I put the other day, there's not enough self-love. But if you're coming back to self-love and saying, actually, I'm doing this because I do love myself and I enjoy this sort of work. But okay, well, you need to care for yourself first and put yourself first. And that means taking the rest, getting good sleep, quality nutrition, massage, release, whatever you need to be able to do to perform at this level.
Yeah.
You need to be able to do it.
I mean, and I think even for myself too, that term self-love is hard to swallow because it sounds selfish. And I think that's where maybe for me, self-care is an easier thing to digest, but we don't realize that, I don't know about your faith walk, but I mean, I'm a Christian. One of the key principles is love God. And then it says, love your neighbor as yourself. But we always forget about that second half of that statement. That's actually the leading thing. It's as yourself. So you have to, and I think I responded to even to your post, is like, you can't pour from an empty cup. And, I'm a father. I can't be there for my 3 daughters. I can't be there for my wife, for my employer. If I'm worn out and maxed out and always chasing things.
Mm-hmm. And I think what I try to do there is raising self-awareness by having truthful conversations with people around you. So if you know someone who is honest with you, or you can ask them to be honest with you and say, hey, look, do you think I'm giving my best at the rate I'm going? Or do you think if I was to step back a little bit and be a bit more conservative about my energy and I could give more to maybe my family and my close peers, do you think that would be better outcomes? I want you to be honest with me. And that's sometimes a hard bullet to take, but going back to Christianity, it's the truth that sets you free, right? So being able to hear that truthful response of someone that you potentially love, giving you saying, hey, look, actually, no, you need to take a break. You do.
Yeah. And finding those folks within that close circle that'll be honest with you, but also that you'll actually listen and be receptive. That's one thing I learned, my own ego getting in the way. I think we we're kind of joking offline earlier about that kind of concept. So when it comes to like the burnout though, how do you address the reclaiming process? That recovery piece. You mentioned a couple items. What else from I'll say tool set or coaching perspective do you look at?
So I really have a bit of a hierarchy of what I would say is management of energy, and a fundamental, the base obviously is sleep. So addressing sleep, or literally having questions around sleep, volume they're having, or the quality that they're getting. If they're getting poor quality, then okay, is there some kind of relaxation techniques we put in? But generally around that is number one, what can we do with sleep? Can we extend sleep? Can we use naps? Can we use deep rest protocols to improve the amount of recovery we're getting that is associated to sleep? And then it potentially could be looking at nutrition. So are you under-eating? Are you overeating? Because both of those are stresses. If you're obese, you're inflammatory, you're adding to the stress to the nervous system. If you're under-eating, you're not getting enough energy, so you're releasing more adrenaline and trying to break down glucose all the time, so you're adding to the sympathetic nervous system, which is causing more stress.
That's a great point.
And then again, and the quality of the nutrition. What are you eating? Are you eating high pro-inflammatory foods, or are you eating anti-inflammatory foods? And then relaxation protocols. So that might be your slow breathing, myophysical release, body work, massage, those sort of things that people can look into.
Yeah.
And at the very top is lifestyle in general. How much alcohol do you drink? Smoking. What are you doing day to day in terms of your workload? Are you able to pull anything back from that? And I guess I go through a bit of a systematic scheme over a consult to begin with, and we look at, okay, potentially what can we change out of all that, and then work together, and then working together to change what I call is like a bit of a potential. Let's meet a space that you believe you can do without sacrificing too much of your workload or your fear of not being to work enough.
And
then
quick wins.
Quick wins sort of thing. And then the next consult's about, okay, well, how much more do you think you can actually do? And that's the way that I would potentially address it step by step there, because then if we're facing a fear, the best way to get over fears is to break the fears down, right? And gradually introduce them. So using a bit of clinical psychology with physiology and overall.
Okay. Just kind of like, I want to say discredit, but reframe the perspective on what that fear is, so you're not kind of operating out of a fear-based mindset.
Yeah, because if someone doesn't believe that they can make such changes without all of a sudden sacrificing their performance, whether that be performance at work or performance in an athlete, then if we can make small changes and they notice, actually, I feel slightly better, or there's been no kind of decline, and we can measure these variables, so we can measure them through whether they've got heart rate variability or rest in heart rates, or perceived stress scales, or CO2 tolerance, bulk scores. If we're measuring these and we're actually start to see improvements, then often they're like, okay, well, this is obviously getting better.
Right. Yeah. The proof is in the pudding, right? As the old saying goes.
Which was going back to my very first client, I had no way to monitor and to measure other than subjective feeling. And because she didn't subjectively feel better,
right,
which takes me on to a whole new theory of how stress and feeling there's issues with that as well. So
that, I've always struggled in the fitness perspective, the rate of perceived effort perspective on training. I've always struggled with that concept of really your perception of it, because as evident by the fact that I myself burnt out, and my perception was I was fine. But if you looked at the totality of things, all the levers were not fine.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you look deep into RPE of exercise. One of the biggest indicators, or most correlative indicators that we have of RPE, is our breathing rate. How fast we breathing frequency. And, if you look at the likes of the guys at Shift Adapt and Oxygen Advantage, and they're all talking about try and consciously slow your breathing down when you're exercising. And not many of them talk about it. They talk about what it does to the oxygen and what it does in the body, but not many of them talk about the perceived exertion, the subjective exertion that you actually get from it. Initially, it's going to feel challenging, but eventually it's going to help you bring your perceived load down.
Okay.
Which when it comes to stress itself, we know that psychological stress causes physiological stress. So there's also help there with in exercise physiology.
I didn't realize that connection. So it's really drawing a better connection between your own kind of understanding of your body and understanding where you are on the gauge, I'll say, more efficiently or effectively.
Yeah, that's I think that's the most powerful thing about utilizing, I guess, conscious breath change during exercise, is that once there's an adaptive phase to it, there's such a mindful element of it that you become more internally focused. We were talking about earlier about the stress being generally being focused on external. When that's happening, is we lose touch with physiological sensations in our body. It's actually called Interreception, which is a sense we have of how our state of our internal body is feeling. generally related to organs. So if you sit there right now and you try and feel for your heartbeat, how fast can you feel your heartbeat?
Right.
I mean, generally people can't, but if all of a sudden, if you start to get them to do slow breathing, 3 seconds in, 6 seconds out for a space of 3 minutes, and then say, can you feel your heartbeat now? Straight away, they can feel the heartbeat, because you've gone internal. The vagus nerve itself, which controls the parasympathetic nervous system, is sending signals back to the brain to tell us what state our body's in.
That's fascinating. I had not heard that detail before.
Yeah.
And what was it called? Interception?
Intereception.
Interreception?
Yeah, intereception. And there's interoceptive awareness, and that's like your ability to be aware of your internal sensations. So sometimes people with anxiety, they have hyper interoceptive awareness. So as soon as their heart rate changes, they're like, whoa, I'm gonna have a panic attack.
Right. Okay.
Generally, people who are in a chronic stress state, they have low interoceptive awareness. And then, 10 years of hard work, and all of a sudden they have cardiac arrhythmia, or they have an atrial fibrillation for 5 years, not even known, or they have a heart attack out of nowhere, is because they didn't feel the warning signs that were happening.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense. And like, it's like clicking a button in my mind is just because you're kind of numb. Like when you're overtired, overtrained,
you're up here.
Yeah. You're in your head, and then you literally lose sensation. I think back on my own personal experience, and it's like you lose touch with, I'll give an example of like an oven, a stove being hot. You may keep your hand on there longer. It's still going to burn you, even if your perception is off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And people don't notice they're tired. They don't notice they're burnt out. They don't notice that they've got some chronic disease going on, high blood pressure, because they're not even aware of their internal state. Not through like awareness of like, well, I guess it is linked, because it is linked. Interoceptive awareness is linked to intuition and self-awareness.
Yeah.
I think it's Jill at Yoga Tune-Up. She talks about it often in terms of like when you're doing self-metaphysical release, it's like you're stepping into your body, and you're kind of you're sending the nerves and the neurons in your body to say you can relax, which is sending signals back to your brain to say you're in a relaxed state. It's the same thing as when you slow breathe. Slow breathing, sending signals from the diaphragm back up the vagus nerve to the brain to say you're in a more relaxed state, and all of a sudden you're in tune more with your body again. And then you might notice, oh, actually, I've got a bit of a shoulder issue. Well, what's that pain in my back? Like,
right.
Is that some,
you're waking up your body in the connection.
Your warning signs. Yeah, this is the basis of yoga.
That's pretty fascinating. I had not heard it from that angle before. Very cool. I like that a lot. So, stress management around what we're talking the physiological effects of these things. So is there like have you noticed from your practice any difference between men and women and how they respond to things or how they adapt to things, just from a more of a scientific perspective?
Men generally like to know the reasons behind things. They like the logic of it.
Okay.
They prefer being spoken to in terms of like, this is the nitty gritty science, like the conversation we're having. Women prefer to feel and experience what it feels like to feel more relaxed and calm. So you have to kind of manage the approach, and that's not necessarily. I mean, there's I guess rules on it on a spectrum, but you've also got to look at the personality type of the individual, because you might get a quite masculine woman who is very logical and very might be an engineer or a mathematician that would prefer to have that language spoken to her,
right?
But when you get through that, eventually you will get through the kind of I guess you could call it, if you're looking at energies, more of a feminine energy, you'll go through to more of actually feeling that intuitive inside of an individual. They prefer that. Generally, it's going through that, and you have to be able to read the individual through the conversation. And it's it took me a long time. It's about looking at the language they use and trying to repeat the language back to them.
Yeah. So how do you do that back to the cultural element of I'll pull on the language thread. If you're noticing the language goes down a particular path that's not optimal, right? They're kind of speaking things over their life negatively. is that something you have to kind of manage and rein through?
Yeah, you can kind of, if you can see it from a different perspective and you can kind of start to use words to change their frame or ask questions to raise the awareness. So now, if someone's talking to you about a negative situation, and then you can ask them, okay, well, what did you learn from that situation? You can try and find a positive in that. And then if you start to create a bit of a positive, you can start to change their behavior or the way they're actually focusing on what they're doing. You know,
Okay.
it's I've learned a fair bit from just listening to what Tony Robbins says about changing people's state. And like, it's you might kind of throw something out that's a bit different to what they believe, and then all of a sudden you come back to a conversation with what they're currently on, and it just like it changes their state. So if they're going down a negative rabbit hole thinking, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that, or I might do this, I simply might just drop my keys on the floor and just stop that conversation. And then I will come in with a reframe of the conversation and saying, hey, so we're going back to what we're going to do with some positive changes in your life. So what do you think we can create that's going to be positive for you?
Yeah. So it's like that little hand clap to kind of like draw attention, so to speak.
Yeah. If a dog's about to fight and you clap your hands and they look at you, you're literally changing state. That's all you're doing. You're reshifting their reticular activating system, which is their focus and attention, back to a neutral kind of, you're bringing it back to you, essentially.
Yeah. So circling back to the name of your firm's Performance Through Health. So how do you define, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but how do you define performance?
But performance for me, actually, the word performance for me is actually being able to live the life you want to live with the people you want to live it with in the way you want to live it.
Love it.
In a healthy manner. So performance for me it's not about being, if you want to be the best athlete, it's about being the best athlete, but you have to look at how much you're going to sacrifice your life to get there.
Right.
But if you want to be able to perform just as a family man, just look after your family, enjoy your hobbies, and go about life that way, how can you absolutely perform that? So for me, performance is always about having a vision of who you want to be.
Yeah. I love it. I think that's such a big thing that ties into stress and that external that we've been talking about, in that so many of us, and good intentions misapplied is I'll call it, where we're doing things, you do it in your youth because your parents wanted you to be a doctor or a whatever, fill in the blank. And it's all these externals. And then you're 10 years into a career and you're like, you're lost. That's where I think a key ingredient to the midlife crisis as a mid 40s, you went down this path of a career and you're like, what am I doing? This doesn't really touch my heartstrings. And so anyway, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So one of my mentorship programs is called Your True Path, because I believe that it's not just my belief, but I believe that everyone is put on a path first by their parents and society and culture that they don't necessarily truly want to be on. And then what happens is they get a lot of kind of psychological tension, and many people might go through an anxious breakdown or a depressed breakdown or a loss of personality. And it happened to me when I moved to Australia. When I was 26, I had a dream. My dream was always to live in Australia and be a scientist when I was older. From the age of 15, I had that just going back from memories of rugby. And when I got there, the career wasn't what it was made out to be. I'd gone from working in probably one of the largest hospitals in the UK, busy all the day, to the smallest, one of the smallest kind of private firms in Perth, Australia, which is a very kind of secluded city. Okay. To go in from busy to seeing a couple of patients a day when I first got there, and I was like, wow, like what has gone on? And
culture shock.
So my career focus went out the way, but I was like, okay, well, I don't know anyone in Australia. So I started focusing on just becoming a social individual and getting known to people, but the two didn't line up. And I started to live a life that wasn't to my values. And being an individual who's always been based in health, I had a hip injury, had an impingement in my hip, and I was told not to squat anymore, and I couldn't really train too much. And that led me to just going down the alcohol and drugs route and losing myself and becoming depressed and suicidal. And I was too afraid to speak to anyone. I didn't want to speak to anyone. I was too ashamed of it. So I started reading psychology. I started reading, being as someone who's had a good academic background. I thought, okay, well, maybe I can teach myself to look into my own psyche and see what's going on. And,
Yeah.
that led me to the reading into looking at Jordan Peterson and his work, and then Carl Jung, who's influenced him massively, and looking into the process of what we call individuation. And I wrote 50,000 words of my life up until 28 years old and reframed it as if I'd created it all and took responsibility for everything that happened to me.
So you literally rewrote your story.
Yeah, 50,000 words. Everything that I wrote it in a victim frame. As if like all the relationship stuff that happened, all the stuff that happened as a kid, like everything that I felt was a traumatic instant to me, I wrote it from a frame of what I believed had happened, and then rewrote it as a frame as if my behavior had created it. And that was the most powerful thing I'd ever done.
That sounds amazing. That is brilliant. And you just taught that on your own?
Yeah, it was. Well, I'm not going to say on my own, because
Sure.
I had a good group of peers around me who were also good mentors, and people who were kind of knew the path I'd gone through, and a small group of friends who were into similar kind of, I guess, readings. I started to delve into readings, Jesus Christ and into the Bible, and utilizing the story of Christ itself as looking at that as a hero's journey, and then looking at, okay, well, if that is a myth that people live throughout their life, it's a story of humanity, then what about if that's also my story? How can I recreate myself and go through a death and rebirth myself? And
Right.
wrote the thing as that, really, as a I guess, what would you call it, use it as a metaphor.
Yeah.
I guess a metaphor story to rewrite my life. Well,
and I think the perception piece, that it's brilliant, of just seeing things from a different seat, not to be a sports analogy, but you see things from a different angle in the stadium, on the experience. But yeah, that's, so what was the most prominent thing or that you took away from that experience? What was the first maybe thing that you took away? Was there like an aha moment for you?
Yeah. If you can rechange things rather than everything's happening to me, but everything's happening for me, then you can start to shift the frame to adopt responsibility rather than kind of victimhood.
Yeah.
Which again, you could look at that exactly same thing in someone who is struggling with performance, who's struggling with burnout. You can say, okay, well, if I am doing this, if I was to take responsibility for myself, then, okay, what does that mean? It means having some humility. It means potentially being more grateful and listening to other people, and going back to those truthful conversations that we were talking about earlier on, and saying, okay, well, actually, maybe it is me. Maybe because you're the only one that has the power.
Yeah. Yeah. We're the common denominator in it.
Yeah, and it's the same when it comes to high performance. You're the only one that has the power. You can have all the best coaches in the world, but if you don't believe in yourself, or you don't have the awareness to know that when you're performing well and you're not performing well, or what your state of your body is in and what you're doing right and wrong, or whether you believe in your coach or whether you don't believe in your coach, like if you don't have that internal kind of awareness yourself, you're not able to. You're always reliant on other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're never going to measure up. I mean, no matter what success you have, the irony of that mindset is you're never going to measure up. Even if you achieve what you probably didn't think you could, when you get there, you're going to be like, well, there's still more. And although it's a true statement, it's still that victim mentality, poverty mindset almost, that you can't get enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's power in combining physiology, psychology, and whatever language you want to use, whether you use mythology or spirituality or religion, the
mind, body, spirit kind of thing.
Yeah, the mind, body, spirit sort of thing, which is what I generally try to integrate. if you look at all the best athletes in the world, or the majority of the best athletes in the world, you've got Lionel Messi, you've got Cristiano Ronaldo, who are in soccer. You've got Nadal and Federer in tennis. You've got who's the British boxer, Tyson Fury. Who's the first person that they always? Who's the first person they thank when they win something?
God.
There's a power in it. There's a power in being humble enough to say that you're not the only one that is doing this. It's not about everything that you've done, but it's about something that you've been given as a gift. And if you look at that as a gift, but also taking responsibility to have that gift and be able to give that to the world in service of who you are, there's power in that.
And I think that's where, like, the word authenticity comes into play, and it's been overused and kind of manipulated a little bit. But when you're finding your true self, like, you shine brighter that way. There's a joy that just emotes out of people when you see them in their element, when they've hit the chord precisely.
It's because people want to feel grounded. And if there's people all around you who are feeling kind of anxious or not concerned and not stable in their own life, if they find one person who's grounded in who they are and their behaviors, their values, their vision, who they want to be, they're attracted to them, because positive energy is contagious. It brings people into you. But negative energy is also contagious. If you were to put yourself in a position of, I think I did a post the other day actually about trying to be, there's like 5 tips you can use to be more relaxed. And one of them was put yourself in a place with people who are relaxed, grounded people, because they'll make you feel that way. But if you're around anxious people who are just driven all the time and telling you that sleep is it's nonsense.
I'll sleep when I'm dead.
it's exactly the same. So that is looking at your environment and who you're around is also, again, it's a thing that you can do almost instantaneously.
Yeah. I mean, what's the old saying? I don't remember who started it, but it's like, you're the culmination of the 5 closest people around you. And so you got to do a hard look at an assessment. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road in things, because some of the folks are the closest to you. So how do you navigate through that to help drive that change within your home, within your community, neighborhood, whatever that looks like?
I think for me, only going off personal experience was, this is something that I did when I was in a state where I was really anxious and really kind of in a bad state mentally, physically, emotionally, and mentally, spiritually. When I first considered those individuals around me, I actually made a list of the people who I believed were delivering value to my life and adding value to my life, and that I was adding value to their life as well. And of those people, I kind of ranked them in the value that they were giving me through how much they reached out to me when I was in despair, and how much support was kind of offered. And when I reached out to them, how much presence were they giving me, and how much were they actually listening to me. And that led to me figuring out who was here for real connection and who was here just for kind of small talk and I'm going to call it nonsense, but like, they're in it for another reason. They're in it either for themselves,
like an ulterior motive.
Yeah, and that led me down to realizing that there was quite a few narcissistic individuals around me, and they were the people that I needed to get away from. And so that was a powerful exercise. How we can relate that to, sorry, not my camera, to rest and recovery is, okay, well, if you were to look at an individual and spend time with an individual, when you leave that individual, do they make you feel more energetic or less energetic?
Mm-hmm. It's a quick assessment. Yeah.
Yeah. When you go home from and this is challenging because if you're an introvert or an extroverted individual, it can also change the perspective there as well. But is a person that you're with just constantly talking about them, constantly talking about how their life's a burden or how much they've achieved, and you very, very rarely get a word in, can you communicate that to them? Can you say to them, hey, look, every time I come away from you, I just feel like I'm not feeling good about myself. I haven't got any energy. I feel like you're contributing to not, helping what I feel. I don't remember the last time you listened to what I said. And I now have a rule where I give an individual one shot, and then if they continue, I just go, hey, look, this is not going to work anymore. This isn't right for me, because your time is precious and the individuals around you are precious as well. So that is something I had to set for a personal boundary for myself, because I was such a people pleaser and a people person. I was always giving too much, and that was draining in itself.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that aspect of it in navigation for me personally over a number of years of just, I think we keep talking around sovereignty at the end of the day, that personal sovereignty of owning yourself and, the good, bad, and the ugly, and understanding what's driving you and is it optimal for you and those around you that are most important.
That's it. Yeah.
So circling back to some of the things you meant in the mentor program, do some of the elements that we just talked about touch on that mentor program?
Yeah. So there's actually a 7-step process that I take people through, but it's kind of like open to see when the conversation comes up, because the conversations can be, number one, it's got to be an individual who's quite open to have some conversations about themselves and be truthful and be honest with themselves. This mentorship is about discovering who you are and where you want to go and what you want to become. So the first concept is actually working them through self-awareness. So if you don't know who you are, what you want, and you're not willing to look at your limiting beliefs and challenging your behaviors currently, then how are we ever going to move forward with that?
Right.
And then for me, it's actually looking at creativity as a domain of play, a domain of actually discovery.
I like that.
So I take people through a few kind of exercises that they can do for creativity, whether that means slowing down, slowing breathing when you're feeling stressed, writing yourself questions, meditating on certain things. There's a creative game that I actually have made to help people get comfortable with not knowing, like getting comfortable with the unknown. And it's basically close your eyes. The first image that comes to mind, the first kind of symbol that comes to mind, draw that, draw it, paint it, whatever you want, and then write a story about it. It can it can be anything, complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Get comfortable with just being able to create things out of nowhere, because you're going to need that to create the life that you want to live. Because entrepreneurship or living a life is, number one, it comes from the Imago Dei, man was made in the image of God, is that we're all divine creators. So we have to have that as an element of our value. And then communication skills, because once you've developed who you are and what you want to have, you need to be able to communicate that to people around you and the world. And for me, that was through podcasting and what we're doing today. That was that. And then it was contribution. Okay, well, now how can you take all that and make that so it's a contribution to your society, your family? Maybe you want to change the world, or maybe you just want to change your world.
Yeah.
Once we've gone through that kind of process, it's then, okay, well, what behaviors do you need to have? Who do you need to be to do the things you need to do to become the person you want to be, or get what you want, essentially? So be, do, have. Behaviors, doing, having. So you might model an individual who's already successful in what you want to do and take their behaviors. Do they have a morning routine? When do they work? Do they have an evening routine? What sort of structures do they have in their life to make that work? Okay, can you model that? Because success leaves clues. Once you know those behaviors, start integrating those into your life slowly. What works, what doesn't work.
So you mentioned leaving clues. There was a past guest, and you mentioned time travelers. That there's people ahead of us that have gone the path, and all you have to do, not all you have to do, oversimplify, but it's just like replicate what they've done, because they've been successful. Now, it may not hit the right chord yet with you, but at least you're directionally correct in developing that process. And it kind of leads towards that entrepreneurial aspect you're talking about of being comfortable with the unknown and kind of working the Rubik's Cube of life.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's about so much of it is about like being able to remove those limits and beliefs that you have. Like, you know, I'm only successful if I've got X amount of money in the bank, or I'm so much successful. Okay, where are these beliefs come from?
Yeah.
And this is where we have to delve into the psychology a bit and go, okay, did you come from a poor family, or did you come from a rich family and you didn't get any money, or have you come from a rich family and they've always supplied you money, and they've created this belief around that money is such a value, rather than, you know, being a value individual through your behavior and service to others. Like it's looking at that and then trying to see what resonates with them on a personal scale. And sometimes I might just be speaking to them and telling them some truths that I believe about from the conversation I have, and then all of a sudden you'll see an eye movement, or you'll see some kind of change in their body language slightly, and I'll just say to them, what thought came up there?
Yeah.
What was that all of a sudden came to mind? And what I've done is I've gone through to their ego, and their ego is going to show me something, and then you've got something to work with.
Yeah, and they might be receptive to actually being forthright about what that is, and wrestle that to the ground.
Mm-hmm. And there we go. And that's the first thing. That's usually if that was to happen during one of my conversations in a mentorship, it's like, okay, well, now I want you to go away and reflect on what that thought is. And the next conversation we're going to have like, okay, what does it mean to you, and how can we start to resolve that and change that, or does it need any work at all?
Yeah.
But this is going down to more my obviously I've got my scientific stress management stuff and my sleep stuff and the protocols that I take people through there. But I guess where my heart goes with helping people in performance through health, the word being performance, being who you want to be.
Yeah.
That's like kind of like a mentorship separate thing that I take away from the scientific role that I guess I can create myself into a persona as well.
Yeah. So to kind of circle back to that, then to that point on the sleep side. So did you do clinical studies, or was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was a clinical scientist in sleep and respiratory science for 9 years. I trained at the National School of Healthcare Scientists over in the UK for 3 years, and then moved to Australia. And that was, doing clinical overnight studies, at home studies, reading the analysis of brain waves and looking at the breathing during sleep. And to be honest with you, the majority of it was looking at obstructive sleep apnea and treating people with obstructive sleep apnea, because it's the other than insomnia, which is often being treated by psychologists now or medication. Sleep apnea is the number one issue that we're seeing in the world right now in terms of sleep. So yeah, most of it was that. But the reason why I kind of moved away was because I have had such a skill set that I wanted to utilize in people that were away from that as well. So yeah, 9 years as a scientist, and now I've tried to more integrate into mind, body, soul, using science and philosophy, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, you need every angle, right? And digging deep into particular aspects of that, but make it well-rounded to really understand everything.
You do, but you also need it just in the language of the communication. Now, for the fact that if you hadn't said to me that you were a Christian, I probably wouldn't have gone down this conversation.
Right.
But me knowing that you're open to that sort of conversation, you would have, and you understood it and you would have received it, it's allowed me to have that conversation with you. So if you're with a client and they mention something, then it's okay, well, if you're open to all those things, what frame are you going to take with your communication? If I've got an individual who's a strict engineer who only wants to hear the science, I wouldn't mention the word spirituality or God or self-love at all. Yeah. I'd go, well, here's the numbers. This is what you need to know. This is what we need to do. Let's go away and do it.
These are the steps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a huge piece that I think in science in general, especially in health, with the help of technology, we're able to get to more personalization with the technology. But also I think a lot of what we're talking about of slowing things down, that more isn't always better, that I don't need 5,000 clients to have a successful business, right? You can have a smaller, more intimate, deeper connection with people to really get to the roots. Otherwise it's kind of just Band-Aids.
And I think people they want that. The world is craving that. The world is really craving connection. We live in a world where we're so connected and get disconnected at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
The actual performance through health actually came about when I started researching into the likes of interoceptive awareness and how disconnected we're becoming. The idea was that I had like a bit of a golden dream that I wanted to take people back to nature and connection, and through scientific and kind of old school retreats.
Yeah.
I wanted to build this company that allowed people to disconnect from the stress of being online and being in this world where, with virtual reality, to coming back to going, okay, can I just be a human again?
Yeah.
Can I just come back to nature and just be like a person who's just sat around a campfire telling stories and reflecting on the day and doing a bit of movement and stretching and okay, we're going to learn about this and we're going to learn about that. And I always said to myself, I want to be there in 10 years time. And I've now got the opportunity here in Bali to do that, to do a retreat where I'm actually going to be taking people through that whole process.
That's amazing. I love it. You're giving me a reason to get to Bali, I guess. Yeah, I think you're really onto something, at least my penny and a half on it. And at the very tip of where I think we're starting to pivot on a broader sense is reclaiming some of that connection and I keep hearing the word integrated life because technology is going to be around. It's affording us an opportunity. I'm in the United States, you're in Bali, and have this conversation. But we also need to have, back to the word we've been using, is boundaries and having proper context of when there is a too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And where's the line we draw? That's the conversations we need to be having is where is it? When does it become an issue to our health physically and mentally?
Yeah. One thing that I saw was somewhat encouraging. I don't remember. I think it was Spain just legislated for employers cannot call employees over the weekend, which the spirit of the idea, I think it's misplaced. I don't think we need to legislate everything, but I think at least it's a good intention to get those boundaries in place.
I agree there. Look, this is another thing that I've looked at with burnout, and it's one of the reasons why I wrote my ebooks, 7 Simple Habits to Manage Your Burnout, is because whilst 90% of companies believe that mental health and burnout are an issue in their industries, it's only about 40 to 50% are actually actively doing something. And I think I would say maybe 75% of those are just doing it as a tick box exercise. Whereas, adopting what we've said is, okay, well, if my company's not doing it, rather than being the victim and saying, oh, I've got burnout, it's okay, what about if you take responsibility yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's 7 simple habits that you can do that could be life-changing for you. And if you want to go through them very quickly, we can do.
Yeah. Let's rattle them off real quick.
Yeah. So number 1 is sunlight in your eyes in the morning. Simple as setting your circadian rhythm up and getting vitamin D and bringing your energy levels up. Number 2 is either getting some high intensity exercise or a cold shower in the morning to bring your energy levels up and to get active and movement. Number 3 is if you're sat at your desk all day and you're not moving a lot, you don't need to eat so much carbohydrates and sugary foods throughout the day because they're going to make you feel sluggish, and you're not a high performing individual, so you can probably not have as much and you won't feel as tired after eating them.
Yeah.
Number four is if you do feel like you've got that mid-afternoon kind of slump in energy, do a yoga nidra or a non-deep sleep rest protocol. Number 5 is so now we're in the evenings. So number 5 is to dim down the light or use the light to your advantage in the evenings and have the sunset. Number 6 is to have a relaxation protocol before you go to bed.
Yeah.
And number 7 is just to take an evening routine. Make a routine that you do each time, which includes the relaxation protocol. So there's 7 things that can bring your energy up in the morning, reclaim your energy in the afternoon, and then bring your energy levels down at nighttime to get a good rest.
Yeah.
And there's simple things that you can do that don't take any energy.
And minimal, if any, cost. And, we didn't really touch on it. We've been talking around it on the last point is the circadian rhythm. We have a particular flow about us for our days to work with our bodies. And that's a great top 7 things to do to really enable that.
Yeah, and they're all backed by these scientific principles that are to utilize the circadian rhythm. So it's not just me just saying that where they're placed throughout the day are there for a reason.
Intentional. Yeah. So what's your nighttime routine?
My nighttime routine. At the moment, I am doing some yin yoga, which is then following that with some OMS or some humming, which is usually for about 10 minutes. The yin yoga also incorporates slowing my breath right down as slowly as possible. And then that will just be going to brush my teeth, and that will be just getting into bed. So yeah, it's a simple and effective thing that I used. I did suffer with insomnia once, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole of trying to create the perfect routine and all this sort of stuff. And it worked very well because I was consistent with it. But I think if you've got 3 or 4 behaviors, that one includes some way of relaxing, and 2 are behaviors that you would do before bedtime anyway. I think if you're consistent in those behaviors, then you're just basically anchoring into your brain that the next step is sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of putting those rhythms in place to like tell your body, hey, we're winding down now.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Martin, I feel like I could chat with you for quite a bit longer, but I want to be respectful for your time. But I like to close things out generally with a few questions. So what are you reading right now?
What am I reading? So I have just been I'm actually reading scientific papers at the moment. So I've gone away from the books. I'm finishing up the Oxygen Advantage instructor's course at the moment.
Oh, great.
With Patrick McKeown. I'm finding I'm getting some additional value out of that in terms of the practical stuff that we can use. But I've just started delving into looking at some scientific principles of how the leptin hormone can regulate sensitivity of CO2 to our breathing. So that's a bit of a rabbit hole that I'm going down.
Interesting.
Which goes back to a theory I had 7 years ago, which there's more literature coming out now, and it's starting to prove some of the theories that I had correct. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Chase that rabbit.
That's what I'm currently reading. Other than that, I tend to stick up to Andrew Huberman's podcast at the moment. That's probably one podcast a week. I'm trying to create more than I consume at the moment.
Yeah, and now you just answered my next question. What are you listening to right now? So Huberman is a common response and one that I listen to, but I don't listen enough of. He's just fantastic.
Yeah, if you can get someone who's doing a scientific literature review for you and then puts it into such a way that's communicated effectively from a professor who obviously knows how to analyze data and papers, and he does that for free, it's saving the likes of me, who is a health science coach, whatever you want to call it, having to do all that such work.
Yeah.
You still need to come from a perspective of critically analyzing it and being self-aware of not looking at him as the God, but
but he still is able to distill the information down, and it helps me because he draws a lot of pictures, but really breaking down this meaty stuff to still be scientific, but digestible and making sense. And then you can kind of like, oh, okay. And you can integrate it into what we're talking about, is integrating it into your why. And getting that kind of substance behind it.
100%.
So last one, what is your go-to rest room recovery method?
Rest room recovery. That's either going to be just steady cadence breathing. I tend to prefer 5 seconds in, 7 seconds out, and just trying to, when I'm breathing out, consciously relaxing all the muscles in my body. Or going to yin yoga. I actually use an online thing called RUM-WOD, range of motion workout daily. It's it's basically yin for CrossFitters, but I enjoy they integrate the breathing, they integrate the movements, they make it very simple. It's 20 minutes at night, or it's 40 minutes on a Thursday.
Okay.
Or just getting out and going to the ocean, going to a beach and getting in water and just allow myself just to feel like I'm playing as a child.
Yeah. There's something about the ocean. I mean, we're a beach family. I love the beach, and we don't live close enough, but that's awesome. I like what you're saying about the RUM-WOD too. I've gotten away from breath work, but where I found the most was shift adapt. I was doing that for quite a while, and they do a really good job of integrating all of that into, I'll call it, performance.
Yeah. No, I love the work that Brian and Rob and Emily are doing at Shift. It really resonates with everything that I've kind of learned or integrated into performance through health, in terms of, everything we've talked about, the mindful aspect of feeling rather than thinking. Yeah.
And I've been fortunate. I had Emily on the podcast last year, I guess it was, and she's the one who introduced me to Yoga Nidra and some of the breathwork protocols that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, they're powerful, very powerful.
Yeah. So how can folks locate you?
So if they want to email is martin@performancethroughhealth.com. You can find the website exactly the same, and all my social medias Performance Through Health, other than LinkedIn. LinkedIn is Martin McPhillimey.
Okay, great. Well, I will advocate for you too, not just because you're sitting here, but the content you're putting out has been, I would say, a la Huberman, in that you're breaking down some hardy things into practical tips, and frankly, in a bit of a fresh way. And again, I mean that wholeheartedly. It's been helpful for me over the last couple of weeks with some of the burnout conversations, which again, I can definitely relate to and still working through, but very practical as well.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you inviting me on here as well.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me, and be well, my friend.